Welcome to the 100 Master Coaches series featuring master coaches from around the world. Let's journey together on this 100 Master Coaches series with your host, Coach Mel, MCC. David Ribott is an accredited non-executive board director and a multi-award-winning executive leadership coach, renowned for his transformative impact on boards and leadership teams across EMEA and APAC. As the founder of David Ribott International, he combines the precision of a former semi-pro athlete with deep expertise in corporate governance and fiduciary duty to unlock leadership potential and drive organizational excellence. With over 5,000 hours of coaching experience, David specializes in navigating rapid change, enhancing board and team performance, and designing tailored strategies that empower leaders to exceed their own expectations. Now on to the show.
Hello, and welcome to the 100 Master Coaches Show. This is Coach Mal, and today on the show, all the way from Abu Dhabi, UAE, please welcome David Ribott.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite. I really appreciate being part of the list and being able to talk to your viewers.
Well, it's my pleasure. And we caught up a couple months ago, and we had a great chat. We're just going to do the same here today and bring David on a platter for all of you. So with that, David, let's just start by introducing yourself, your passions, anything you want.
That's big. I may go non-linear, but I love being a father. So I'm a single father. So I want to anchor that first. That's one of those things. I don't know if it's as much as a passion, but it definitely is one of those roles I was born to have and I really appreciate. Let me take a step back. So I live in Abu Dhabi, but obviously I'm not Emirati. But I've been living in Abu Dhabi since 2008. And then prior to coming here, I used to live in Seoul, South Korea, and we'll come back to that because I think there's some connection there to how I ended up coaching, or at least the version of coaching you see today. But originally, I'm born and raised in New York City, South Bronx. My family's from Puerto Rico, so we're Latin American, and so actually, the weather in New York just does not resonate with me. So when you hear about Abu Dhabi and the desert and the heat, let me tell you, this works for me.
Yeah,
I can do it 40-degree heat, 38-degree heat. I don't miss the snow. I don't miss the rain. Like, I love it. I see the sun every day and you just feel it. I wasn't built for the cold at all. But a little bit about me. I run a board and leadership advisory that's based in Abu Dhabi, but really covers the GCC and as a primary region, but then also covers EMEA. It's called Ribott Partners, and it's interesting because one of the reasons why I ended up getting into business was quite accidental. But the reason I stay in business is because, and I don't know how you feel about this, but there are a lot, whether it's coaching or consulting, advisory space, I fundamentally believe in partnering with clients. So much of what I noticed early on were a lot of bad actors in the marketplace. And so part of the reason why I entered the marketplace and part of the reason why I stay in the marketplace is to help clients figure out what value looks like, while at the same time really speaking to bad actors in the marketplace. Really positioning themselves as experts, but not really delivering or dare I say, not operating of high integrity. So that's a non-negotiable for me, real non-negotiable. And I think, actually, I guess this does answer your question. I think high integrity really is a passion. So whether it's coaching, whether it's advising, whether it's in my personal life or professional life, it's high integrity, with compassion and all these other things, but high integrity is just non-negotiable. And you see it straight away when you're with someone who is vacillating and not sure where they land. It's a difficult place to have that kind of conversation, whether it's whether it's socially or in a personal context. Like, it's just hard to BS that.
It kind of reminds me of like going on a merry-go-round. It's like it gets you nowhere. It just goes round and round, right? Until it stops or until you get off the ride. You know what I mean? In that sense,
and it's soul sucking. To your point, there is no replenishing of the relationship. There is no feeding of the soul. It's just complete depletion. And I'm at a place now where I can see it a lot faster. I think the difference today is I am not dismissive of those moments. I try to meet them in the middle where there's a bit of humanity, because there's always some window of humanity. There's some shared common goal and some common purpose. So I try to aim there.
I'm tempted to ask you in the relation of work, right? When you're talking about all that, I mean, it's prevalent out there where people say, you know, our culture is focused on our people and bringing out the best in people. And then in reality, the culture actually is very toxic. It's very non-human based, if you know what I mean. It's always just about numbers and KPIs performance. What do you say with that? I mean, I'm sure you do come across organizations like that, and whether you and I choose to step into it and be the change, or do we kind of walk away from opportunities or situations like that? What do you think?
I'm a high performance guy. I originally come from sports,
Mm-hmm.
so the figure of athlete development always made sense to me. And then if you couple that with on my father's side of the family, it was a military family, and so while I didn't join the military, and it wasn't really I wasn't hit over the head with it through osmosis. I did
Mm-hmm.
pick up this idea of I picked up some of the traits of discipline and commitment and hard work and also just measuring what works.
Yeah.
Like really battle testing it. You know, this isn't working. You try this, you iterate, and you're able to take feedback in those situations. I share that to then say, you know, toxic cultures are tricky. I think, you know, two things can be true. And so there's a bit of
Mm.
polarity here.
Yeah.
If it's a difficult place to work in terms of being demanding, that may not
Mm.
necessarily be toxic. And I think this is where I sometimes have to explain to, you know, client organizations or sponsors, you may not have a toxic environment. It just may mean that you're overworking, you're driving. Are you structured in the right way? Do you have all, let's say, for example, are you structured with the right organizational design? Do you have
Mm.
all the roles that you need to
That's
really
true.
flush it out? Or do you have bottlenecks where more people are stressed throughout your organizational system? Because that pressure can also feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. And that could
Mm.
also, when you've got so much pressure on you, you almost feel like, well, don't senior management know what's happening?
Yeah.
And so it becomes easier to identify that they're dropping the ball up there. That said, though, I mean, to your point, toxic environments do exist. I think more and more at least becoming a topic that is discussed with some view to try to remedy it. I think where you were headed was, and it made me think of a recent client that had in the UAE. I'll kind of just leave it blank. So
Yep.
I won't say Abu Dhabi
Yep.
or Dubai.
Sure.
I'll leave it within the country.
Better.
And I
Better that way.
had a heart to heart. I had to have a heart to heart with the sponsor to say, and this was one of those situations where it was more in the advisory space. So sometimes in
Mm.
advisory, you're either an advisor, you could be a consultant, or you could also be coaching. It just depends. And so I'm real careful about which hat I wear. And I'll tell the client, like, hey,
Yeah.
this is my advice. I'm not coaching in this moment. If you want a different organizational culture, then you also have to look at the way in which you lead your direct reports. And so this was the head of the entity.
Mm.
That person, and I won't use gender as well, that person, CXO team, was constantly getting scolded and bashed. And whenever they made mistakes, they weren't held accountable. They were chastised, but they
Mm.
weren't held accountable. And so it set the stage for how to navigate those tough moments in those meetings because, okay, I can take a public lashing. Within a day or two, I can go back to the way things were because no
Yeah.
one's really being. So at the end of the day, when we talk about toxicity, it's about letting, and going back to what I said before about bad behavior and bad actors in the
Mm.
market, if you tolerate bad behavior or you tolerate less than to standard leadership in
Yeah.
your organization, then yeah, as the expression goes, what you permit is what you promote.
Very
And
true.
in that context, I just had to say, like, listen, I can continue to give you advice, but at the same time, you're going to have to hold someone accountable or it's just going to remain the same. And I
Mm.
don't know if I can really be effective here
Mm.
any longer. And I mean, suffice to say, the contract came to a completion, but to be honest, I was happy to let it go because we just weren't aligned. We weren't aligned, which then meant the work wasn't in high integrity.
Mm.
You can be supporting a difficult client context with a lot of moving parts,
Yeah.
but as long as you're still fighting a good fight and you have
Yeah.
alignment, still looking in the same direction. You're still in alignment and integrity with
That's
yourself
true.
and for the client. And it was just clear. And I have a lot of empathy for this particular person because they were in a bit of a no-win situation.
Mm.
So a lot of compassion, a lot of empathy, and at the same time, something's got to give.
Mm. Thank you for saying all that. I think every situation requires that foundation, and yet it has all the moving parts, right? So that empathy, the understanding, the acceptance, the responsibility on the other side, and then of course the alignment, right? Whether it fits, it still fits. Whether it doesn't, it's gone, it's moved on. People change, things change.
Yeah.
And decisions change at the end of the day. So lots of moving parts over there. Love to come back to the fact that you were exposed to all of that. And what kind of drew you into this coaching space?
Purely accidental. Purely accidental. I came out of sports, love
Mm,
sports, played American football to a high level, played semi-pro.
wow.
And as I was a university student, I was working at the West Side YMCA on 54th Street in the city. And that's when I started to coach kids in
Mm,
sport. And that transition into sports coaching was it was really meaningful because it coupled well with my background in education. So in another life, many, many careers ago, I studied education and I worked
yeah.
in the New York City public school system where I was both a classroom teacher, but I also worked in violence prevention. And I'll come back to that, which really means mediation.
Mm,
New York City public schools quite violent, metal
yeah.
detectors, like, and this is back in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Mm,
And so, and I was also a product of that school system, so I knew it really well. So between the two, sports coaching was quite nice because it was at an age where I resonated with the kids because my background was secondary anyway.
yeah.
It wasn't primary, but it was secondary. Preteen until high school was really my sweet spot.
Yeah.
And I think that was where I really enjoyed, because once I stopped playing, I really enjoyed the coaching side of things. Fast forward, when I leave New York, I'm living in Korea, and it's the first time I understand that you can work abroad, and I'm consulting at Samsung, and I start to realize, oh wow, the way that we develop athletes and the way that we build teams, not too far off from the way that we develop leaders. We
Mm,
just use different language. The constructs are very, very similar in the way that we
yeah.
develop, practice, and then we go live. I think the difference between, sports or the military, because sports and military have this foundational relationship. A lot of what we do in sports comes from the military. A lot of the psychometrics or the ways that we identify talent in corporate come from the early investment of the US Army investing in psychometrics and really predictable analysis
Yeah.
of behavior under the most extreme conditions. I started realizing, oh wow, this thing called leadership development is kind of cool. And while I was there, I was able to get trained in the original model of grow. So I was able to use some of those coaching skills very different than sports coaching, because in sports coaching, you're a bit of a coach, you're a bit of a mentor, you're also a bit of a teacher. So you span the horizon of all the needs at the same time. Whereas
Yeah.
with executive coaching, what I saw straight away was the structure to get the client from this space to this space and how you ask questions. And it was a little bit less of some of the range or latitude that you're allowed as a sports coach because you do everything
Mm,
under. So from there, when I ended up in Abu Dhabi, I went back into education. And so I kind of part coaching for a little while because at the same time, when I arrived in Abu Dhabi in 2008, I was injured in a really bad car accident
oh,
that kind of put me in pause for a few years because it was years of reconstructive surgery on my
wow.
hand, physiotherapy. And then by the time I came out of it, I had a lot of clarity. Well, I don't know if I had a lot of clarity, but I was asking myself different questions.
Mm,
And from there, I got clarity on a few steps forward. And one of them was going back and studying to do my doctorate. Another thing that came out of that period of time was I felt like I wanted something else. And I can
mm,
feel this move back into corporate outside of higher education. So by the time I'm in Abu Dhabi, I'm in higher education. I'm an administrator. My doctorate is aligned with it. It's leadership governance, but something was missing. And I
Yeah.
remember asking myself this question somewhere around 2012 or 2013, and thinking, when was the last time I was like completely happy with all the things that I do? Because sometimes professionally, you have these different skills, and then you're able to deploy some of them.
Yeah.
But I was hungry to deploy all of them, and I didn't have the language at the time. I can look back and see the clarity of it all, but at the time, it was much more cloudy. And I remember realizing, oh wow, I was really happy when I was doing that work at Samsung in that very specific way. The challenge for me was I didn't have a coaching credential. I just kind of got trained in it. And I had no record keeping of all those hours. So I was starting from scratch, and I was happy to
Yeah.
start from scratch. And I ended up finding a place in Dubai called the Coaches Training Institute, which I think then got renamed into the Coactive Training Institute. And that for me just changed my life. And I can see from there, I can see a pathway back to what I was looking for, plus more that was on the horizon. And so that's how I got back into coaching. It was the car accident really, changed. It changed kind of the status quo at the time, shook me to my core, helped me to access a few questions that I needed to ask myself. As time unfolded, I was able to answer those questions. And it was, I want to get back into coaching. I want to move into this space of spending more time with adults again.
Thank you. Everyone that I interview is that the story into coaching is so unique. Right? And as you were sharing all of those, again, the theme here is moving parts. And I have a sense of that whole introspection of all the moving parts was so important. Right? You're mentioning the questions that came, but then you had to have the space to answer those questions. Yeah, it's like that was the right time to answer those questions. You know what I mean? That's so beautiful. I'm wanting to go on this side and saying, there's no one formula to things in our life. I'm sure there are people wanting to know, how do I get into coaching, or what do I have to do to be qualified as a good coach? So I'm going with that thread right now to kind of say, in your experience, what do you think were the pillars of what makes good coaching great?
Ooh, that's a good question. Commitment to your craft. You can't just rock out of bed and just will yourself into being a good coach. It's just not going to work. Like you got to put in the time, effort, and energy to learn your craft. And I think this is where having a baseline of what good sports coaching looked like, and then what it was like to receive coaching, and then what I saw with the kids I was coaching. That was a great baseline. But then I was moving into a different modality. So I understood some of this stuff I can keep, and a lot of this stuff I'm going to have to move to the side because it's not one-to-one. You have to take it seriously. You got to put in the work. You got to get the reps in the gym. Like, you've got to go in and do the practice, and you got to meet your own insecurities. Like, fundamentally, if you're working with any client, whether it's personal coaching, life coaching, executive coaching, team coaching, you've got to get to your own edge and know what it feels like to be at the edge and recognize, I can stand at the edge. I'm not going to fall off.
Yeah.
I know how to be here with someone else who's fearful. They're going to slip off. And that ability to go where the client goes, because before you can become a good coach, you've got to be a client. And so the rigor of that training really is the make or break. And if you just allow yourself to take that leap of faith, be the client as opposed to trying to learn how to, what I do as a coach. Of course, there's moments for that in the debriefs and as you go through your coach training, your program, but just allow yourself to be the client, because to be a client is vulnerable. And as long as you can figure that out, and if you can meet to that, the coaching skills of remaining neutral and creating connection with the client and being able to hear what the client is saying without words, to be able to feel the essence of what's happening. When you get there, you're plugged in. And that's still just the beginning. So we're talking about just getting the basics right. Because once you get there, it's almost like tango. I use this expression of tango. When you watch beautiful tango, you
Yeah.
see, technically speaking, there's two people, but they're gliding.
Yeah. As one.
So the more masterful the
Mm.
dancing, the more effortless it looks. And I think that's it is at each iteration of your coach, your development journey is how much effortless is it becoming? Not that you're checking out, but that you're able to kind of glide in that way.
Yeah. And as you found yourself in this beautiful industry that we're in, helping people, working with some of the best out there, what actually keeps you sane? Because there is that bit of us. I know we say we don't pour of ourselves onto other people's cups, we create space for that and all that. But I think that's the bit that we do have to give of ourselves, right? So back to that, how does David keep himself locked in, right? Sane in those moments of storms that will come when you and I are running our businesses, right?
Indeed, indeed, because
Yeah.
when you're running a business, it's not just the delivery side of things. You're having to bring in the commercial contracts that allow
Of
you the
course.
privilege, the opportunity to deliver within client.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Again, I think I go back to sports. The foundation was set there because I understood you practice, you play, you recover.
Mm.
And even though I didn't know it at the time, I just always understood I need a day in the week where my body is not getting pushed.
Yeah.
And with that was also sleep, nutrition, what you're putting into your body.
Yeah.
So I've always been disciplined about this. At this stage, I really, the quality of your relationships. Like I
Mm.
spent the entire day in Dubai yesterday for a client delivery, and then on the way back, I caught up with a dear friend, and it was just perfect. Like Stephen Covey has in his last book, The Eighth Habit,
Yeah.
which is a beautiful story. He has this checklist of how are you feeding your head, how are you feeding your heart, how are you feeding your body, like
Mm.
how almost like a thoroughbred, a horse does need to be run. Like you do have to push your body. I'm nearly 50 and I push my body to its limit to see where I'm at. And then I continue to build on and then push again to see where I'm at. So how are you feeding your head? How are you feeding your heart? How are you feeding your body? How are you feeding your spirit?
Yeah.
And when I read that a few years ago, that became my anchor for kind of my internal audit. You know, how am I taking care of myself? What am I doing what am I doing to feed? And I find that I spend a lot of time in the spirit space because the spirit space really feeds my body and it feeds all the others. It's kind of a cheat hack. And I find that, with meditation, which I picked up when I lived in Korea, yoga, going to the gym, having a tight knit group of friends who are invested in me, for whom I'm also invested in, and
Mm.
those relations are just very, very different. I think you end up having this ecosystem on purpose that allows you the space to do what you do and recover and get fed, and it's almost a self-sustaining system. Because one
Mm.
of the challenges being in the helping profession that I learned early when I was a mediator was you give and you give and you give. And a client of mine, who I've been with for a while now in Dubai, said, man, they took me out for lunch. And that's quite nice because then you just get to be a little bit more normal
Yeah.
and you just talk about anything. And it's not a coaching conversation. They had asked me, like, who do I go to? They go to me, but like, who do I go to? And they hit the nail right on the head because they
Yeah.
recognize that the range of what we do, because, as a child, my father was a family business owner and I understood how family business worked. You can't separate family or your role in the family from the business. And so when I look at my corporate or my government clients, you can't separate their role from the organization, from their role at home and what's
Mm.
happening at home. So, we span everything. And so many of
Yeah.
my senior leadership clients have experienced divorce or on their second marriage or third marriage. And so there's a lot of context. Some have access to seeing their children, some don't. It's heavy. It's heavy. It's absolutely heavy. So early on, I remember in one of my coach training sessions, I came up with this metaphor for how heavy the work can be because you're in service there of the client, to kind of the analogy of being a miner and going underground, mining for whatever it is, coal, going in clean, but coming out filthy. Now, and it doesn't mean that you're dirty, but you're coming out with the requirement to scrub it off. And as a metaphor, I used to use that because the challenge is you go into coaching or you go into these situations where you're in service to the client. You go in clean like a miner would. You come out with some of the soot and the residue, and you have to have some kind of protocol to be able to get you back into balance and equilibrium. And the challenge is, at least with a miner, you can physically see it. Because you get so much enjoyment out of what you do in the coaching space. You know, you're leaving with a smile. You're leaving in, I guess, in fulfillment or in completion. But you still need some kind of protocol. And I think I just understood that to be true early on, from sports, that you need some kind of recovery protocol, even if you don't have a serious injury, because there is wear and tear, and you just have to be mindful of. So I came in with a little bit of that understanding, and I just brought it in. But I have that analogy, and I often share that analogy with coaches that I mentor or supervise, or if someone reaches out to me on LinkedIn and they ask me these questions, I tell them, listen, make sure you have a recovery protocol that takes care of you, and that you understand what coming back into equilibrium is. Because if the sooner you figure that out, the quicker you will realize when you're out of alignment. And not that you're out of alignment in integrity, just understand you're probably pushing yourself to your max, and it's a warning sign that you might be burning out. So as a preventative measure, just know what that is for you.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. Love the analogy, and everyone's going to take it a little differently because all of our lives are a little different. And yet the similar thread is that words that you use, the recovery zone, is so important, and not just going into that when we are hurt, doing a preemptive so that we have that in the rhythm of things. We can practice what we preach in all honesty, in every area. Yeah, wonderful.
And just to that last point, in case this benefits your audience, I have a go-to when I'm having a tough day. And I find that if I'm having a tough day, and by tough, I mean I'm not in balance. As soon as I'm done with the day, I go for a run. And I live near the water in Abu Dhabi. Go for a run outside near the canal, 30, 40 minutes, I come back. Whatever it was is gone. So we all also have a go-to that is failure proof. So also identify what that is.
I love it. Right after this recording, I'll be doing my walk. So mine's the walk. Walk in the bush.
It's funny. I do the run for myself, but I do the walk at night with my son because it's a little trick that I've learned. So if I ever ask him, I come home from work and he's here from school, how was school? Good. What'd you do today? Nothing. I say, okay, buddy, let's go outside.
Let's go for a walk.
Yes. Let's go for a walk. But he takes his bike and I run with him, and then he doesn't stop talking. So for some reason, it's a go-to to get him to also open up, and it's a go-to for me to recover, get back into baseline. And another thing too is it's not an accident that I run by the water, because water for me is also an energy source. So just kind of also understanding is an energy source for you, nature. Then what is it? Is it the desert? Is it the beach? Is it the sand? Is it the mountains? Do you need to go hiking? Whatever that thing is.
Yeah. Just gonna flow through to your journey towards mastery. And I know that's an open question, because mastery is not a destination, right? It's a continuous growth journey for all of us. And love to know when you realize that you've come to that place. Obviously, with the ICF, it's called the MCC.
Yeah.
But you and I know it's more than just that titles. When did you first realize the need for something more in your journey of coaching?
Mm. When I changed careers and I left higher education, so
Mm,
this safe, career track that I was on with the doctorate, like it was just going to happen. Once I left,
mm,
I dove into the world of professional services where I took all of my skill set in coaching to kind of work in the space of client advisory, leadership development firstly, then extended into board advisory. I dove into it. So I think for a period of about 5 or 6 years, I trained in one model, trained certified, trained in another model. So from 2013 to about 2016, I dove all the way in. And I think that was my way of
mm,
really committing to the craft of the work. There's a piece of me that, most people don't know. I love art, and I see the work through the lens of both a practitioner but an artist. And I was looking at all these different modalities and ways you can bring them together because, as a former educator, you're looking at casting a wide net and then trying to pull it together and curating an experience.
mm,
And so whether it was getting trained in traditional executive coaching or strengths coaching or relationship coaching or organizational coaching, I was enjoying the process of one, learning and growing, practicing, building more muscle, but then also weaving it all together. By the time I brought my head up and I was able to look at where I was already at the threshold for submitting my portfolio for MCC. And I hadn't done that on purpose. It's kind of like flow. I went
mm.
into it so much that by the time I brought my head up,
Yeah,
I was at 3,000 hours, and I thought, how did that happen?
yeah.
Because it was on steroids. It was just on steroids. And I think that for me was just reconfirmation that I had made the right choice because there was a piece of me that when I left my doctorate and I left higher education, I wrestled with the idea of did I make the right choice? And there was a
Mm,
little bit of insecurity also around I left my doctorate, but I had the capacity to finish it.
mm,
And by the time I popped my head up, I was in such a different space that I wasn't ashamed to explain why I left my doctorate. And it was just while I dove in, I was also transforming. And I
yeah.
think for me, I knew I made the right choice. And
Mm,
because I've always been committed to the process of getting better, I just knew that, again, in sports, we call it deliberate development for high performance. I wanted to continue to challenge myself. And it just naturally ended up, I was at the threshold at MCC, which was hard, by the way, because all of your training until that point, you also have to let go of some of it to
yeah.
onboard something else. And there is this, can I make this work? And it's not easy.
Mm,
And I think there's a difference between being a master certified coach and coaching masterfully. And there are times when they meet in the middle and there's a sweet spot. And there are times when potentially you may have landed an MCC level coaching session, but it may not have been masterful.
yeah.
I also wrestle with that. So I'm just going to put that out there for
Yeah.
your audience, like just in case so that they don't feel
I
alone.
love it.
I did wrestle with that. And I leaned into some of my elders and I talked to a few people who were ahead of the journey
Yeah.
and we reconciled. And it's like, okay, you can still be masterful. And if you want to reach the level of MCC, okay, this is the demonstration. This is what you have to do. Get there first and then look back and see what it all means to you.
Mm. Thank you for bringing the two parts. I kind of sense it's not two separate parts. It is two parts, just a different side of the mirror,
Mm,
where it plays importance to have that first bit, which is the excellence level of that MCC. And then that bit that gives us the juice to carry on.
mm,
When we know we're in 100% service to the client. And that to me
mm.
is masterful service when we are no longer there trying to maneuver the client to a certain direction.
I was just gonna say yes, and it's nuanced. Like,
Mm,
I mean, coaching is continuing to evolve, and I think
yeah.
I often get asked because I sit in a space of advisory, That's how my business works. Inside of that is coaching. It just depends on how the projects are scoped. And I'm also clear because ethics is important to me. Listen, client, I'm wearing my advisor hat. I'm going to wear my coach hat. Or I may just ask them in the moment, like, which hat you need me to wear. And I say that one of the competencies are, to hold the client's agenda. This is really nuanced because if you listen to some of our elders in the profession who have been at this 20 and 30 years before it was a recognized profession, I think it was Peter Hawking's, don't quote me on it, but I think it might have been him. I saw him talk. If we're to really hold the client's agenda and they're asking for advice, I'm paraphrasing it as best I can, but aren't we supposed to just meet them where they are? So it's quite interesting. And, some of these things are nuanced. And I think this is where you can have a masterful moment with them that may not track at the MCC level, but you're going to have to make these decisions in terms of, what's in the client's best interest, but at the same time, just educate the client around, hey, client, I'm going to shift out of my coach's hat to meet you where you are. And not everything goes according to plan, and being able to dance in the moment with the client is really important because at the end of the day, are we to be dogmatic or are we then to meet them where they are? Because there's a relationship of trust and credibility that's built there. And there's no perfect solution. And each of our clients will react differently, and the context for which these things emerge will influence potentially a different response from us that is in alignment in that moment, but it may not be consistent along the way.
Yeah, lots to chew on that. And on the joking side, I say I don't send in all of my coaching sessions because I don't think it will meet the mark of MCC every single time. Just saying.
I think you're not alone. I may have to say I could fall into that camp sometimes too.
David, as you step into this space in your life right now and look around and obviously see the fast-paced environment that we are now, with AI and a lot, every futuristic thing is in the now, in the present right now. Where do you foresee the impact of coaching taking place while still hopefully keeping what coaching really meant, the essence of coaching still there in the midst of these changes?
I'd have to double check the numbers, but I read something recently that said about 60% of coaches in the marketplace globally have a credential, which then means 40% don't have a globally recognized credential. I'll just position it as that rightly or wrongly. The difference between coaching and, let's say, therapy is that it's licensed and controlled in terms of its credentials being recognized by local governments. Coaching is open to the marketplace, and the marketplace will be dictated by client needs, and that continues to evolve. I think this is also where I'm a bit in a privileged position because when I left higher education and I moved into professional services, I already had a lot of the skill set that you see in big management consulting firms. And with my background in leadership development, corporate governance, and strategy and performance, having the skill set of a mediator and a coach just really complements that. And I think this is where I would say to people, don't reject all that you built up prior to this moment and you kind of coming to coaching. See where there's a space where you can incorporate it all, because truth be told, as a business, it's finite. And so you can only offer a certain amount of coaching sessions, whether it's one-to-one or group coaching sessions, without having products, which then means you're going to have to structure an offering that goes beyond the one-to-one service. Do you have asynchronized courses? Like, you have to offer something beyond just the one thing, because if you don't, you're going to burn out as well as an entrepreneur or as a service provider. I think if you're a practitioner who's internal inside your organization, you're always going to have the leverage of being able to embed coaching as part of the way that we develop talent naturally, develop careers, as performance review cycles. So it's a natural embedding throughout the ecosystem. I would just then say there, make sure that it's anchored in a way that allows for symmetry and consistency throughout. With tech continuing to emerge in the way that it is, stay ahead of the curve and as best you can understand what emerging tech means, become familiar with it and see ways in which you might be able to incorporate or adapt to it. But don't wholesale reject because you feel like you want to move into the world of coaching or you want to coach primarily as what you do as a professional. Don't discount all the things that you come with because they all add value, because that all makes up who you are. Because at the end of the day, whether a client is hiring for a coach or a consultant, all the big firms do the same thing, whether it's a McKinsey or a BCG or a Korn Ferry or a Heidrick and Struggles, or pick one. What happens is a client is actually hiring the person across from them, which then means, who are you? Why do you do what you do? And the cleaner and crisper it is why you do what you do, the service you provide, and the value you add to clients, that then just becomes your value proposition. And I would then say, always remember and anchor to that, because if you lose sight of that, it's going to become a bit more muddled what you offer, and clients won't really know what you stand for and what it means to work with a Mel or what it means to work with David.
Yeah, knowing yourself, knowing what you offer, being comfortable with that, grow and continue to integrate all the other stuff that you're learning along the journey, and obviously at the focus of servicing and putting your customers or your clients first in everything.
And on that, you said something and it just sparked a connection I forgot to say earlier. Don't be afraid as well to stretch into new areas where some of those skill sets can benefit here. I actually was trained as a mediator first before I trained professionally as a coach. I think CTI does it beautifully in terms of the way that they teach listening, level 1, level 2, and level 3 listening. It was done in such simple terms. It was so profound. My background in mediation, when they're training you on how to be a neutral, is really, really, really solid. And so don't be afraid to see what a different industry or a different practice offer into your current practice as well, because you'd be surprised. You'd just be surprised.
Yeah, never discount all of that. Be brave to bring it in, right? Define yourself along the journey. Challenge yourself along the journey, I like to say. And of course, land in a place where you're brave enough to face your own insecurities and still choose to live and serve the people around you.
It's a nice way of putting it. Yeah, just this constant check-in. And I think sometimes you can lose sight of that, is just having this constant check-in with yourself. Is this still working for me? And what needs to be true for it to continue to still be something that I love?
Yeah. Well, David, I really appreciate your time and all you've shared. Thank you for going deeper than you obviously need to. And I'd like to just say, if there's any last words that you want to share with the listeners, what would that be?
Well, thanks for the invite. I'm appreciative to be able to speak to your audience and to have this conversation with you. Words of wisdom, any last words? Enjoy the journey as well, because I'm also a little bit competitive. I had to slow down at certain moments to remind myself, even if you get to this next credential, there's still another one and another one. Just slow down enough to be able to enjoy and still grow, but just enjoy the process, because those milestones, they come and go. It's really the inflection points where you're able to just reflect on who you're becoming along the way. And I think, if you get too fixated at the end goal of, I got to get, especially if you're at the beginning of your journey, I got to get 100 hours, I got to pass the test, I got to get this many training, I got to submit my ACC. Allow yourself to enjoy the process, because you're never going to be at that stage again. You're never going to be at the early stages of, this is my first coaching practice. I just finished my first 10 hours. I just finished my first 50, my first one. Once you cross that threshold, you're only adding. So just enjoy it along the way, and just allow yourself some latitude to just be able to say, Yeah, that was a terrible coaching session, and I'll be better at the next one. And that's okay. It really is. Because at the end of the day, the client, for the most part, is still getting value, but
Yeah,
you're being hard on yourself. Just enjoy the journey. Slow down enough.
yeah.
Stay focused, but slow down enough to really enjoy the journey. Sip it, breathe it in, digest it.
Hmm. I'm just sitting here enjoying myself too. Just listening to you. Yeah, thanks again for being on the show.
Anytime. Thanks for the invite.
You're welcome. This has been the 100 Master Coaches show today with David, myself, Mel, reminding us all to slow down, enjoy the scenes along the way, have a bit of a laugh at yourself once in a while, and continuously grow in yourself internally as well as how you serve the people around you. Take care, everybody. Catch you in the next one. Bye for now.
Bye.
You have been watching the 100 Master Coaches series with your host, Coach Mel, MCC. Brought to you by Catalyst Coach. www.catalystcoach.live. We will be right back with our next Master Coach on the 100 Master Coaches series.